My name is Aisha Ibrahim. Many thanks for choosing us. Ghana at least needs to find 61 billion cedis more to fill the deficit in its budget for the 2023 fiscal year, as it plans to spend more than 220 billion cedis. We're asking how government intends to fill that gap as it signs on to the IMF deal, plus the overhead economic challenges. My colleague Kofi J, who is with the research desk, has joined me with more. Kofi, from the budget, how does it look like government can raise that first 61 billion to support the budget deficit?
Well, Aisha, so first we have to look at how much government intends to raise in 2023, which is next year. So that's about 143 billion Ghana cedis, and want to spend close to 220, 222 billion cedis. This includes amortization and also clearance of, debt on all the arrears that we owe in 2023. But we've been asking the questions. If you look at revenue generation, for instance, what is government looking at in terms of, how to raise revenue to actually close this 61 billion deficit that we actually see coming through in 2023? So if you look at the revenue sources, Aisha, if you look at tax revenue, for instance, out of the 143 billion that government intends to raise in 2023, 112.4 billion is supposed to come from tax revenue. Okay. We know yesterday the e-levy was passed, some changes and then also some maintenance also there. But we know that VAT, which has been raised from 12.5% to 15%, is supposed to rake in 23.7 billion cedis next year. This year, the projected revenue was 14.5 billion. E-levy, we know last year, this year for instance, government wanted to raise 6.95 billion. Revised it downwards to somewhere around 300 million Ghana cedis.
We know
exactly next year, government wants to raise close to 2.3 billion cedis from e-levies. So if you look at all these, get fund levy about 4.4 billion, and other tax. So let me walk you through some of the proposals that some of the tax measures that government wants to really do in 2023. So they are going to reintroduce, road tolls. Road tolls yes, brings in somewhere 72 million cedis to our coffers every year. They are going to reintroduce road tolls. Also, if you look at, the introduction of, withholding taxes on winning from betting. Okay. So going forward in 2023, if you are someone who engages in betting and you win something on your platform and you are bringing it back into your account, government is intending to tax this as well. Also, there's reintroduction of road toll. I've spoken about that. There's also introduction of taxes on electronic smoking. So shisha and other things, going forward in 2023, government intends to tax all these tax handles. But we've also been looking at expenditure, for instance. Okay. More than 220 billion will go into exactly. This is the first time we are crossing this threshold. We've never actually budgeted to spend more than 200 billion in a single year. This is the first time we'll be doing that. And line items, for instance, if you look at compensation of employees, it will cost us close to 44.99 billion cedis in 2023. If you also look at interest payments on our loans, it will cost us more than 50 billion cedis. We were looking at the budget and we saw that if you look at payments on our external debt, the interest payments alone could cost Ghana 21 billion cedis in 2023. Wow. So that's what government's actually bent on, making sure that they get the external debt restructured, so that at least we can save the economy some 21 billion cedis in 2023. So government will find ways and means to make sure that the 60 billion, deficit that we'll have could come down in 2023. Looking at some of the measures that we spoke about.
Oh, of course. So some of the measures is what you've spoken about, the exchange debt program, which already has faced some fierce resistance. I mean, how much will that bring in if government is successful in doing?
So government is looking at somewhere around 100 billion, especially if you look at the the debt exchange program for domestic bond holders. Okay. But we're looking at external as well. It's also supposed to bring us, if we're able to do this, it will bring the budget down to somewhere around 21 billion. Okay. Because if you look at the projected amount we want to spend on interest payments on our external debts, about 21 billion. So if you're able to go to the negotiation table, talk to our external creditors and tell them, look, we will not be able to pay this money as we've planned to do next year. We converted it to cedis using the $1 to ACD given by the Bank of Ghana, and there's somewhere around $2 billion, dollars. And if you are going to use $2 billion to pay for your external, interest payments on your external, then it tells you that the $3 billion that you are hoping to get from the IMF, about 87% will be gone. By the time that you are done actually paying,
you will still be owing.
And remember that the IMF deal is a 3-year deal.
Okay.
And we've been tracking the data, and we saw that from 2018 to 2021, we pay close to on the average $1.7 billion every year to settle external interest alone. If you add amortization, it's about $2.4 billion. So it's a dire situation for us as a country. We have to find ways and means to make sure that we reduce the $61 billion, deficit that we actually
we're having for the year 2023. And I'm happy that I've been joined by Professor Lord Mensah. He's Associate Professor of Finance at the University of Ghana Business School. Prof, how does it come across to you that this year, 2023 alone, we are seeking to spend over 200 billion, and we actually have to raise 61 billion cedis in addition, because that's the deficit if we look at how much we intend to spend?
205 billion, I don't know. Within that, you'll find a deficit. There's a gap between what the government intends to spend and what it is able to generate. And we're looking at around 143 billion as government revenue generation. Now, these are all reasons why government is trying to look at, debt exchange to reduce interest payment. So indirectly, if government has to raise the 61 billion, from different sources and it's not possible, government may have to look at the expenditure side and then find a way to reduce the expenditure. And reducing the expenditure indirectly is a way of financing, your deficit. So effectively, that is why government is trying to get this debt exchange that has been hanging on over the past few weeks. And at the same time, looking at external, debt exchange program as well. One thing the government has not been doing, which I think we may have to look at it, and that should be a sacrifice, and it's going to be a political sacrifice, is to how to, reduce discretionary expenditures. It's something like the capital expenditure and all. So far, government has not, I've not seen government touching on that. Goods and services, if they are within a certain, limits that government can look at it, it should go a long way to help. That will even send a signal to the creditors that, government is sacrificing in one way or the other. So we should also sacrifice to make sure that the economy comes back to its footing. So, the negotiations that are ongoing on interest payment and then, both internal and external is an indirect way of, deficit financing.
You've spoken about the fact that government needs to cut down expenditure. And we know that the measures that it has...
Not just expenditure, the discretionary expenditure.
We know that... Yes, Prof. So we know that the debt exchange program and all the places that they intend to take monies from, especially from the labor front, who are already against the touching of the pensions fund. But government hasn't given us any roadmap as to how it intends to reduce its own expenditure. I'm talking about reducing the large government size. I'm talking about reducing its spending on some items that people think are frivolous. How do we cross this hurdle?
Yeah, well, like I always say, what is the government exchanging for the debt exchange? It's what your statement have always been, making. Debt in itself is between two parties, and whatever the case may be, for parties to come into an agreement, there should be a sacrifice from both ends. And so government cannot put the entire, sacrifice onto the creditor. I think, government should show the signal that they are ready to sacrifice one way or the other. And that is, possibly downsizing, which will find a way to reduce goods and services as one of the budget lines. And then also, the capital expenditure that government intends to spend on some of the projects that it intends to do. This is not a time to target, projects that the cash flows may not be immediate. We are in a dire situation of cash. So whatever you are putting the money in, you make sure that you rip it back into the economy within the shortest possible time. So the government needs to rethink and know exactly what they are looking for. It's not a matter of crossing the hurdle. It's about understanding what you are up to.
Professor Lord Mensah is an associate professor of finance at the University of Ghana Business School. He just made the point the government must also tell us what they are exchanging for the exchange program. Now,